Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's chat. We have a wonderful panel here today to talk about limiting beliefs, which relates to careers and how we can all work on reframing our story and hopefully overcoming and moving forward from those limiting beliefs. Our panelists today here all have a very different background, so I think it's going to be a really diverse set of voices for you all to learn from. And they're all doing some really amazing things in the world today. We're going to be exploring how the stories that we tell ourselves, both conscious and unconscious, can really impact our careers, our teams, our abilities to achieve goals. So again, everyone, welcome. Thanks for being here today. As you come in and get settled, feel free to put your name and LinkedIn profile in the chat, introduce yourselves, where you're calling from if you'd like. Also feel free to come off of come on video and say hello. We always love seeing your beautiful faces. And again, submit any questions that you might have for the panelists in the chat. I'll be looking over those as we go. And then for anyone who doesn't know what Talent Collective is, we are hosting today. I'm Krista. I'm one of the co-founders of Talent Collective. We are a community for women in recruiting in the talent acquisition space. But we host a lot of really great fireside panels and workshops that are not only related to recruiting and careers, but also to wellness and being, trying to improve our well-being. So I think that this one's going to hit on kind of both of those topics today. So really excited for that. Very big thank you to our panelists today for being here. They're just a wealth of knowledge and such a joy. If anyone walked in as we were chatting, you can see the energy is already amazing. And before we get into introductions to our panelists, we're actually going to start with a short breathwork exercise. We realize that not everybody might be in a place to be able to do this. So we're not going to make it super long or, this thing where you have to close your eyes or, get into a prayer position or anything like that. But just want to be able to honor this time together and to be able to center ourselves. I know a lot of us are probably rushing from meeting to meeting to meeting. And so sometimes it's nice to just kind of take a moment and slow down and be present with where we're at. So however that looks for you, no pressure to close your eyes or anything like that. And so Jessica has actually offered to do this for us. So I'm going to pass it to her and we'll start with that.
Hi, everyone. Exactly what Krista said. I'm sure many of you are coming just from another meeting or from life into this space. So I just want to take a couple of minutes. And like Krista said, you can do it with your eyes open or close your eyes. What I invite you to do is put your feet flat on the floor and palms face down on your thighs. And take a breath in through your belly. And exhale, dropping your shoulders while you do. Now I'm going to have you focus on your butt in the chair. And I know this is going to sound weird, but take a breath in, feeling your butt in the chair, almost like you're breathing in through your butt. And exhale. And now focus on your feet and feel the ground underneath your feet as you take a breath in through your feet. And exhale. And lastly, your heart. I want you to focus on your heart as you take a breath in. And as you exhale, imagine your heart growing just 10% more. And that's it. It's a really quick, if you're in a meeting and you're stressed, 3 points: butt, feet, and heart. Back to you, Krista.
Amazing.
Loved it.
Yeah, that was great. I think I need that multiple times a day. All right. Well, let's go ahead. I'm going to do just a quick introduction on our panelists, but would also love to hear from them directly. So you've already heard from Jessica McClure. She's an executive coach and works at mental, action, subconscious, and the somatic levels. And then we have Mel Baldridge, founder and president of Tutti Quanti Executive Recruitment Leader on team development and coaching. And then Sansan Fibri is founder and CEO of Wakefully, subconscious intelligence platform for coaches. So again, really, really diverse background. And maybe in that order, we could have you all introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about why this topic is important to you, the topic of limiting beliefs, and really recognizing those and overcoming those in our lives. So Jessica, we can start with you.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Jessica McClure, and I'm an executive coach that also does workshops, ERGs, speaking, the whole kit and caboodle. And why this is important to me is I work with a lot of high performing leaders. And whenever I start working with them, I always have them do a self assessment on a leadership categories, about 10 different categories. And when we have feedback from their bosses or leaders, I find 80 to 85% of the time, the leaders mark themselves 10 to 20% lower than their leaders see them as success in their role. And so, why it's so important is my job is that by the time we're done working together, they're on par of how everybody around them sees them. And that's so it lifts up confidence in who we are. I was that person for many years in the corporate world. And so I started this 10 years ago so that I could help people lean out from just head down, follow through, don't let anyone see you sweat, to really own all of your strengths and decondition everything around you.
Amazing. Thank you. All right. And Mel.
Yeah, well, being in recruiting and headhunting, over the years, we've had the privilege of partnering with hiring managers and job seekers. But what drew me to the conversation is the invisible power of our inner narratives that they hold over us. And it's not just in our personal life, it's in our careers. And so those inner voices, those inner narratives, they impact how we show up for our coworkers, show up for and advocate for our customers, and also how we lead organizations. So helping people uncover and reframe those internal stories for me is like one of the most empowering things that we can do.
Thank you. All right. Sansan.
Hi, I'm Sansan Fibri. I'm the founder and CEO of Wakefully. We're a technology company that's defining a new category in mental wellness that we call subconscious intelligence. We use AI to analyze dream data and emotional signals to help both individuals and organizations uncover limiting subconscious narratives and turn them into insights that are trackable, tangible, and transformational.
Amazing. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to get into asking each of you a couple of questions. And then at the end of the panel, we'll have some that anyone can chime in on. And so, Jessica, let's start with you. So you've worked across multiple layers of the self. So mental, somatic, would also love maybe a definition on somatic and the subconscious. So how do you see these layers influencing the stories that your clients tell themselves in their careers?
Great. And I'll start with somatic, because how you felt coming into the call versus how you felt after the breathing is what somatic is. It's about getting into your body. There's that chicken and the egg. What comes first? Your emotion, the feelings, the thoughts, which create the behavior, or the thoughts which create the emotions, which create the behavior. And the models I like best are the ones that have the arrows going both ways, because oftentimes we're so in our heads all day when we're working, we're just powering through. And so we're bracing for what's coming next, and we're automatically responding in a certain way that we have always done because that's what we know. And so I'll circle back to that. But the thing that I use the most, or what I tap into all the time, is this concept of we have a foot on the gas, of we know where we want to go. We know what we want to work towards, or where we want to spread our leadership, or in our personal lives, or all the things. But then we have a foot on the brake, which is our subconscious, which prevents us from moving forward. And what happens when you have a foot on the gas and a foot on the brake? You go nowhere. So you have the best intentions of how you want to move forward, but these things inside of you are preventing you from doing it. And so it's a simple exercise, and I do it all the time. I did it just this morning with a new client, where I'm like, well, what's the worst case scenario of taking your foot off the gas? And it always inevitably gets to, I will be fired, I will lose my friends and family, I will have nothing, and I will die. It always goes to that. And so once we realize what really is preventing us, what that hard foot on the brake is doing, we can start lifting it up with working with action, noticing what's happening in the middle while we lift that brake up to understand, is it true or is it not? Are we going to lose our job? Is everything going to happen if we start lifting off that foot off the brake? And so that's where you start bringing in the somatic work of noticing how your body feels, and so that you can start preparing to how you want to change how you show up and how you
Core is, so you got it down to one lane.
Bill Murphy, I think you're on your audio.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Decode.
No worries. So that's how I link everything in together. Is you need to understand what's preventing you. You need to know how your body feels when it's normal, how it feels when it's relaxed, and when it's in, stress or fight. And then you've got to take uncomfortable action to put that gas down in order to eventually lift it up until it dissolves.
Mm-hmm. And when you talked about, those fears, and like when you go the layer deep of like, what is the root of that fear? Yeah, you're not going to die, right? Like you're most likely not going to lose your job because of this thing, right?
Yeah.
So it just shows just how irrational sometimes we can be, but it's all, that unconscious layer of like trying to protect ourselves, right?
And just today I said I did this exact same thing, and they were like, I don't want to lift the brake off. And I'm like, well, what's the worst thing will happen if you don't change your behaviors now? And it's the same thing. I'm eventually going to lose my job. I won't have anything, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Would love to hear a story. Maybe you can share a moment when a client's career breakthrough came from addressing, that deeper unconscious blocker, and then how you help them navigate that.
Yeah. So I'll continue with this same theme. And it's one of my favorite testimonials ever. Is they said that I took them from surviving to thriving. Mm. And the break was that they had to be perfect. They had to be prepared. They had to always know everything that was going on. This is a person in more of like a sales type of role where they were putting themselves out there. They had to constantly be on. Mm-hmm. And so as we introduced some new concepts around curiosity, of saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I can get you one. And just being human, what they found is that they started getting so much more support because people wanted to help them. And so they found that people started coming in, they started relaxing because they were in a burnout phase because of all the preparation that they were doing before every meeting, that they were constantly in this. As I talk, imagine how tight your body feels. I got to be right. I got to do this. I got to do that. So slowly unraveling that and knowing that they had tools to offer from curiosity shifted everything for them. They got a promotion within 6 months. And it was from this place of, I don't know everything, but I will figure it out, or I will get you the right people who do.
Oh my gosh, what a great story. Love that. And I'm sure there's plenty more where that came from, but that was a great one. Thanks for sharing. All right, Mel, we're gonna pass it over to you.
And Krista,
So
before you start with me, everything you just said, Jessica, I just want to say, I felt like you were describing me as a business owner. Oh my gosh. First of all, there's also not only the fear that if I don't keep everything, all the balls moving, that something's going to drop, so there's that. But then there's also like the reward system, because I'm like, oh, I can look at, my engine's revving up here, and I'm a high performer. I can get it done. But then I find it very difficult to, like, on the weekends, even just allow myself to slow down, because I'm so productive at that high level. But what you're saying is like so much, it's resonating with me. We're gonna have to talk after this. Yeah, I just had to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Well, let's go into talking a little bit about you, Mel, and your experience. You've been leading talent acquisition teams. So tell us, in your experience, how do internal narratives like "I'm not good enough" or things of that nature show up in the workplace? And what's your approach to helping individuals rewrite those stories?
Yeah, it's such a great question. First, I want to create a little context. I worked with a leadership coach years ago, and her name was Vera. And if you speak any of the Romance languages, you know that Vera means truth. And Vera dropped a truth bomb on me that has impacted my life, and I take it with me everywhere. And she said that life is holographic. And so that means whatever's happening in your career, if you zoom out, it's probably happening in your personal romantic relationship. It's also probably showing up in your friendships and your family relationships. And so if you're somebody who's running a not enough story, it's that's like a through line through every area of your life. And so when she shared that with me, I was like, oh my gosh, that was so fascinating, because it's kind of like the lens at which we're experiencing our reality, right? So now I'm going to do a storytelling, because I feel like through an example it'll land. I talked about, we are in the role of advocating for our customers as recruiters, and we had a recruiter at one point who, in my experience, was dealing with some of their own not enough story. And we won a new client, and they were a small company that was like direct to consumer e-commerce brand. And they were launching their Shopify site, and they needed a customer experience manager. And we have a great ops admin who sourced an initial pipeline of candidates. And one of them was a standout candidate from this big apparel brand, big name brand. You guys would all recognize it. And when the recruiter who's responsible for doing the outreach saw the candidate, and we talked about the candidate, they were like, oh, there's no way that person's going to leave their company and come work for this small company. And I just saw that was an opportunity for a coaching, because they, in my opinion, were seeing it through their own lens of not enough, and not enough that maybe that they weren't good. They weren't enough to be able to sell the opportunity, because they didn't see the possibility of the opportunity. But it comes back to that subconscious of not enough story. And so we all talked about it as a team of like, well, what is this opportunity though? Because there is real opportunity here. And then, by talking it through, they reached out to the candidate. The candidate actually was interested, and they went through the process. They saw, even though they were a manager in the other role, they were able to go into a director role and build something that was small, and build it up. And that, for them, that was their career trajectory that they were looking for. So for them, it was, as I say, a slam dunk. And so they got hired. And yeah, it was just one of those, like, just change that narrative and that perspective, and become aware of that subconscious narrative. And it'll shift how you're showing up with your customers, your coworkers, your team. So.
Such an interesting story. I've had that happen many times. I'm the kind of person in my recruiting career that will call anyone for anything. I'm like, who knows? Like, they might be open to it, right? I had a colleague who is just near and dear to my heart, but she like had a very high bar for everything. And she actually went out on vacation and I was covering her desk. And so I called one of her candidates for this job. She comes back from vacation. She's like, I would have never called that candidate for that job. And the woman, it was at like an auto body dealer or like an auto car dealership. She's like, she would have never, like in my mind, she would have never said yes to that
Because
job.
it's male
And
dominated and whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and so we placed her there and the whole thing, and it was such a good learning moment for I think for all of us to be able to, like you said, talk about it as a team and kind of unpack some of those narratives or just messages, things we tell ourselves. Which kind of goes into my next question for you, Mel, which is about the importance of nurturing a life outside of work. I mentioned the story about, my colleague taking vacation and she felt like she could never leave her desk because, she was so like workaholic, perfectionist, like didn't want anyone else to be, on her desk and helping with her business. But it's so important to do that. And you learn these amazing lessons when you are able to do that. But so talk a little bit about, nurturing a life outside of work and how that has influenced your leadership approach with your teams within really high paced and high growth environments.
Yeah, I mean, I've always believed that work's just one facet of a well-rounded, meaningful life. But it's only one facet. And I also want to acknowledge that what we're about to talk about, having something outside of work, I like to volunteer. Like I love wildlife and that's where I spend a lot of my downtime. But even volunteering, I recognize that's a privilege that not everybody has. So, maybe it's not volunteering, maybe it's just being a part of a book club. You're a single mom and you've got your work life, you got your family life, and like that book club brings you just a piece, some peace, that's just yours, and that helps with your sanity. But by volunteering or being in a book club, it also expands your network and who you are as a person, which also will bleed over into your teams and how you show up in your work life. So especially volunteering, you can just open up networks, galore and that sort of thing. But it also gives people a sense of purpose because also, not everybody's in their dream job. So maybe you don't get all of your fulfillment and satisfaction, which is another conversation because there's a way to do that too, even if it's not your dream job. But let's say it's not, by having stuff going on outside of life, whether it is with your family or volunteering or just whatever that is, it helps bring that, just a well-rounded, peace of mind and just we're all dynamic people. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and that balance that I think a lot of us need outside of work, especially those people that are, consider themselves to be high performers, like you talked about earlier. So thanks for that. Let's pass it over to Sansan. Really excited to hear from you. You do something just so unique, and I loved meeting you the first time because I've never
I did
heard
too.
of a company doing what you do. So like very excited to hear more about that. So Wakefully, your firm, you help people work with their subconscious through dreams. So can you share a story of how a dream shifted your professional trajectory and internal narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything so far that's talked here, and I'm writing notes. I'm taking notes. So yeah, every startup has their origin story, and obviously in my case, it's an origin dream. So picture this: it's May 2020, height of the pandemic. New York City is trauma central. You got the helicopters whirring over, the sirens on the streets. Otherwise, you're seeing nobody. Everybody's isolated. I was one of those legendary early pandemic relationship implosion. Got thrown out of what I called my home for 5 years, kind of hanging between, sky and earth, no grounding, nothing solid to hang on to. And I finally move out and I have this dream. And in this dream, I find myself at the edge of a cliff. I'm standing at the edge of a cliff and with two other versions of myself. There was male me, like the embodiment of male energy me, the embodiment of female energy me, kind of mama, papa me, and then little me, the fear based, the ashamed, afraid, I'm not enough, I'm not good, I've done nothing, it's going to fail, it's not going to work out. All those beliefs that we talked about. And it wasn't a big heroic moment. We were going somewhere and we were actually thinking trains, planes, automobiles, nothing's going to get to an edge of a cliff. So the only logical thing to do was to jump. So here we are, we jumped, we're in midair over the abyss. It's just abyss everywhere. And fear-based me, little me, panics and goes, are we falling? And higher wisdom me go in unison, no, we're flying. And it was like a flip of the switch and the abyss tears open, opens way to a beautiful blue sky, a picturesque, like a French countryside. You're almost like cartoon-like. It was so idyllic. And here we were flying peacefully towards our destination. 36 hours later, I closed my first venture investment, my first venture capital investment. So what this dream did and my ability to tap into it, the dream exposed my story. My story was, I am a first-time founder, a non-technical founder, a solo founder, immigrant founder, woman founder, mid-pandemic, pre-product. You know, the story was I'm falling and I have any reason to fall. Thankfully, I'm somebody that has the tools to tap into my dreams. And I realized that this higher wisdom part of me was saying, well, you have a choice. And it's just as logical to choose flying. And if you do choose it, the universe is going to come and meet you there. And like Mel mentioned, the holographic thing, just like the not enough or whatever other issue you're dealing with spreads into every part of your life. Also, Mel, what you mentioned about having those interests and being fulfilled outside of work, that also reflects. So having that message reflected into every part of my life. And obviously translated in a very tangible, very immediate way. But that was a great example of flipping that narrative and realizing, well, if it's just a narrative, then I just as well choose another one.
I've heard you now tell that story a couple of times and I like still get chills. Like it's just such a powerful story and love that it came from that flipping of the story came from a dream. And I think I even had asked you when we first met, like, what if you don't remember your dreams? You know, like, what do you, because I wake up every morning and I don't remember my dreams. We didn't plan to talk about this, but can you give any advice for people that might be in my shoes who are like, I want to tap into my subconscious, but how?
It's our brain does what it's been taught to do. So for years as kids, because kids have very vivid dreams and they are often can be quite negative, you know, the monster under the bed kind of thing. The parents, to calm them down, they say, oh, don't worry, it's just a dream. It's not important. And so we're taught it's not important. And that's part of why our brain doesn't make the effort to remember them. The good news is whether you remember them or not, the dreams are working their way. This is the mind's way. It's like the mental playground of the mind. It's where we can sift through the events of the day, what we really felt about them, the real story comes out, and we can even prepare for what's next. You know, life is not a dress rehearsal where your dreams are, and you're literally practicing emotional coping strategies. But so that's just to say that the way to remember your dreams is just to want to remember your dreams. But to take it a milli steps further is to tell yourself that you want to remember your dreams. And so at bedtime, you can say to yourself 5 times out loud or in your own mind, I want to remember my dreams in the morning. I will remember my dreams in the morning. Really feel what it would be like. If you value your dreams, your mind is going to make an effort remembering them. The second trick is to get them down on paper or in an app like Wakefully within the first 5 minutes of waking up. 95% of our dreams are going to be forgotten if not recorded within the first 5 minutes of waking up. So as you're waking up, it's a great time. And with Wakefully, you don't even need to start thinking about typing or, forming sentences. You just record yourself by voice. It transcribes it. It doesn't have to be full narratives. It can be fragments and just thoughts, emotions, places. You saw a wall, you saw a monkey, whatever it is.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, all the crazy things that might come up. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So tell us, what advice do you have for professionals in this virtual room who want to start integrating subconscious intelligence into their work or lives?
Well, so looking into your dreams will give you a really great direct view into the story that we've all been mentioning here all along, that is holding you back, that is telling you you're not enough, this one is not going to answer my call, whatever it is, you're going to expose, that story gets exposed every night anyway. So, and it's true that at first it can seem very confusing. You're like, well, I don't know what this dream means. If you start writing them down, even if you didn't use an app like Wakefully, which you totally should, to analyze it, you don't even have to analyze it. Writing it down, anything you do with your dreams, really anything you do with your mind is taking it a step further. So your mind has its processes and it does what it needs to do to rejuvenate itself. Just writing it down helps. Then asking or finding out a little more about it helps. So every step helps. So even just writing down, you will start noticing patterns. Is there, there are a few good tricks to do this. Is obviously you want to think of it as a story. Who are the operate? What's the who, the what, and the where? Where is it happening? And what do you feel about that space? Does it feel confined? Does a restaurant, you were at a restaurant, does it feel busy and overwhelming, or does it feel festive? Does it feel eerily quiet, or whatever it is? The where, the who are the operating characters other than yourself, and the what is the main activity that's taking place. And then what's really great is to think of even like very cliche coin of phrases or metaphors, cliches, a bad apple, this was, what's the one with the bird in the hand?
Oh, yeah, I always forget that one.
Um, you see what I mean? You can find a cliche or a metaphor that can kind of encapsulate, or try to title your dream as if it was like a big Hollywood movie. Sansan gets lost in the forest, or that was Are We Falling or Are We Flying? The one that I just talked about. And that can give you something, because our brain kind of wants to distill it to its core messaging. So that's where it helps to start seeing those patterns. And really, that's the first step that we're looking to do with Wakefully, is to help just uncover the story before we start reshaping it. Is before you can change anything, you have to know what the it is that's already there and maybe not working for you. And maybe it was at one point. Maybe these are coping mechanisms that you've developed in childhood because you were abandoned, or because whatever it is, you don't need them anymore. So the first step to gaining agency over your stories, over your emotions, over those invisible narratives, is to just become aware of them.
Yeah, I did some coaching years ago, and a big part of it in the beginning stages was, listening to those stories that we tell ourselves and just uncovering what those are. And sometimes that's so hard to just identify that, because we're not aware, going back to what we started with, like with being in our body versus just constantly in our head and like do, right? Versus like being present, taking a moment to stop and actually listen and understand and be present with what's going on.
And I'm sure Jess is familiar with this. we say, I want this, but something in us is operating directly against it. So
Mhm.
until we wake up to that, and this is why Wakefully and not Dreamy, which was the first name for it, was because it really is about awakening to that story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's great. Okay, now I have a couple of questions for all of you. Would love to hear from you. And as people are listening in, please feel free to put any questions for the panelists in the chat as well. I just have a couple of questions left here. So we all carry narratives, often unconscious, as we were just talking about, that shape the way we lead, coach, and make career decisions for ourselves personally. So, what's one story that you had to personally unlearn, and what changed for you as a result? So, any of you can feel free to chime in.
Well, I'll start. For me, the story would be that I had to have it all figured out before taking action. I used to get stuck in analysis paralysis, waiting until everything was like perfectly thought through before making a move. But as a business owner, that really doesn't work. It's limiting. And over time, I really started to see how it was limiting the progress. But when I, became aware of that, like what was happening, then I started to take different action. And for example, start to hire people that were, knew more than me, were stronger than me, and just trusting them that they're going to help get to an outcome that I didn't have all the answers for. So I think it just allowed me to be, surrender a lot and, lean on my team more, which is also a healthy, I think, give and take too, because I think everybody wants to feel purposeful and a part of something. So yeah, that would be mine.
I love the surrender word that you just used. There's a book that I want to start reading, but I can't even remember the name, so I probably won't. But somebody was telling me about it. This billionaire guy that wasn't a billionaire, but he said, like, this is going to be my year of yes. Like, whatever comes into my life, I'm gonna just go with it. And then basically all of these things happened in that year that led to, the billionaire status or whatever, like a very fulfilling life that he ended up having. But I love that surrender, right? Like, I'm gonna let these things happen and come into my life, and mentioning like people that are better than me and know more than me, and not having to control so much ourselves. Thanks.
I'll go because I feel like my story is similar to Mel, but it comes from a different angle. Because I too wasn't, as an entrepreneur, solo entrepreneur, I was procrastinating. I was not moving forward the way that I wanted to. And I love to understand all the stories that we tell ourselves or that we have been told. And so one day I was in therapy, this was years ago, and I said, oh, well, my mom used to always call me a bullshitter. And the therapist was like, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, yeah, it was a term of endearment. She said I could talk my way out of anything. So she would always be like, oh, Jessie, you're such a bullshitter. And I will never forget her going, well, that was not kind. And I was like, well, what do you mean? It just is. It was what I grew up with. And so once I started to unpack this you are, I realized that it's so important for me to be authentic and to not be perceived. That was the farthest thing I've ever wanted to do, was be perceived as a bullshitter. And so it shut my story down from a young age. I was never comfortable being in that teacher role, that wisdom role, even that storytelling role. I always asked a lot of questions. Yay, that's perfect for a coach, right? And eventually, once I started to unpack it, I realized where that source came from. And I was able to start sharing my story from this place of strength. And in a way, she protected me, because there are a lot of people out there who are not telling the truth or who expand stories. And that was so important for me to never be that person. So it's really shaped my business but I don't let it hold me back anymore from sharing my story.
Mm.
And I want to add that I know Sansan, and I added her. I've always kind of tracked my dreams since my early 20s, but I hadn't dreamt in a really long time. And when the action of downloading her app triggered my dreams of me saying, I'm going to use this app. I want to
I like that.
dreaming again. And so that's a little plug for you as well. Of if you're not
Love it.
a dreamer, just try the app and see if that shifts it for you.
Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah. We've definitely designed some devices and some reminders around it to remind you to remind yourself to remember your dreams. But even just downloading it, I love that. That's such a cool story. Well, I think the origin dream that I told had a lot to do with exposing the story and changing it. But there is something else that comes to mind. I grew up in a family where my dad was a scientist, he was a physicist and a physics professor, academia man, scientist. And my mom was pure artist. She was a dancer and modern dancer and choreographer. And growing up, and actually anything that whiffed of business or corporate or money was bundled into it, was kind of like in our intellectually artistic home with no money, that was poo-pooed, and which is a big narrative that I had to shift because I want the success. I know that when I thrive, everybody around me thrives, and this is what I'm creating for the world. So, and something so I did go more into the arts early on in life, and I was an actor, and then I evolved into screenwriting and eventually producing. And when I started producing, that was a crossover from art into also you're a filmmaker, but you're also doing the business side, and you're raising funds, and you're doing budgets, etc. And so, and then I realized that, whoa, I had a pretty decent business acumen. And from there, I don't think I would have ever thought of, but actually today, when I think of it, what is more creative than starting a business? You're literally creating a world out of thin air. And my creative juices are in full blown every day, including when I'm pitching investors, including when I'm working on our financial model and our financial projections. For me, I'm not good with numbers unless I know the story behind them. So that was the only way for me to learn how to build a financial model, was to actually understand the story behind the numbers. So that's my
yeah, love that. That's a great way to, what we talked about earlier, like reinvent ourselves, right? And you saw yourself as this artist and this creative person, and learned through all of those experiences that you have this other side to you, but you can also be creative through that, right? Um,
yeah.
okay, great. Okay, and my last question. So, as you know, I think this audience is very diverse, along with our speakers. So we might have recruiters out there, different leaders or managers, coaches as well on the call. So as we come wherever we are professionally, how do we discern when someone is facing a deeper emotional or psychological challenge? So we mentioned a couple of times, in a coaching situation or even a management situation with a direct report, someone coming to you with these limiting beliefs. It can be a lot of responsibility to talk with either a direct report or someone you're coaching or mentoring, and really kind of realize like, oh man, there's something deeper here that, maybe I'm not qualified to take on with this person. So how do we responsibly refer or support without overstepping or, making them feel bad? If anyone has any stories to share or tips that we can all learn from, that would be really helpful.
I'll go as a coach because it is a fine line, I think, especially. And I will always say, I always ask people if they're in therapy first. And I feel the two go in tandem really well together. And I will also suggest, if I hear someone bringing up a lot, like, oh, the trauma of my past, they'll take little stories of it. And I'll often say, have you considered therapy? That's a really great place to unpack it. And even oftentimes people will go into the story of their childhood. So I always say therapy is a deep dive into your child, or I'm sorry, therapy is a deep dive to understand who you are based on your point of origin or your stories of your childhood or your familial. And coaching is, I take that, though we want to know how these stories have impacted you, we want to hear how we can move you forward from this place forward. So though people often tell me stories, rather than saying like, oh, as a child, how did that impact you? You know, da 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 da. I'll say, so if we think about your scrappy child who always had to fight, how is that showing up today in your leadership? How is that showing up today in your friendships? And so we're exploring it from the lens of the adult, present day adult. And so we can go into stories. And I also had to learn the hard way. I do EFT tapping as well to help people move through shifts. And I took someone to a side that this was early on in my career. And I knew that I was in a place of, I don't want to re-traumatize them and I'm close. And so I had to pull back, and I knew this person had a therapist as well. And so I was like, you know what, we went too deep. I apologize. I think this is for therapy. Thank God, it was a lesson I learned early on and didn't come back and bite me on my butt. But I think we do have to be careful.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing those. Yeah. Some really good examples.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So in my teams, communication and transparency are two of our core values. And so, we generally have historically had a pretty open forum, and where people on the team felt comfortable speaking openly about what's happening. But there have been times, and it's been a learning lesson, where it has gotten really deep, and it took me a long time to realize I don't have the tools for this, and to be able to say, I really want you to feel supported, but I don't have the tools. I can't carry this. And I would carry, what you shared with me, and others on the team could carry if somebody was really going through something that was something deep rooted, that was unresolved from childhood. And so, just through experience and time, I finally got to a place where I'm like, oh, you know what? I want you to feel supported. And yeah, I would make or I would ask, I would approach with curiosity, like, are you talking to anybody professional who has the skill set, who has the tools? I want you to feel supported, so that's kind of how I would approach it now.
Well, I'm dealing more with collectives and cohorts rather than individuals. So I don't know if it as much applies, but I'll say how we're dealing with it as a company that is dealing with consumers. And, we have both a B2C and a B2B, is just having those disclosures and having certain trigger words that will send them to a list of helplines. We having disclosures that make it very clear we are not here for any psychological advice. This is a self-care tool. This is that's why I say mental wellness, not mental health. We are not, you know, how do you call it? Something approved. The clinician one. We're not clinicians. We're not offering clinical advice. So that's our approach. And yes, it does end up landing on the individual, and so we kind of have to take that more as a corporate responsibility to make sure that we're covered in terms of what we communicated to the end user, but we don't actually always see or get to deal with them. So
Yeah, I think
hope that helpful.
definitely, you bring up a really good point too. that was, I think, tying into Mel and probably even the work you do coaching, Jessica, but like the liability piece that can come from it, right? If you start to go too deep with an employee, or maybe, someone you're coaching, or in a business relationship with in some way, you aren't qualified for that. Mel, you mentioned not having the tools, but there's also a level of like, you don't want to be responsible for this other person's, psychological space and what they're going through. There is somebody more qualified out there to help them. And so I think it's really important to call that out when you do see it, and, really, again, respectfully refer them, so that, you're protecting not only them, but you're also protecting yourself as a professional as well. Well, thank you all. I mean, this was just amazing. I actually was getting some private messages in the chat about like, is this a weekly thing? Like, loving this. So, really, really happy to see, people are really enjoying this conversation. I think one of the reasons maybe we're not getting any questions is hopefully people will reach out to you all directly with any questions they have. I know this is a topic that can be kind of sensitive, and oftentimes people have their own personal, things that they're going through that are deeper, and, you wouldn't want to put necessarily in a chat. So please feel free to reach out to our panelists directly. I did put their LinkedIns in the chat. I'll also send a follow-up. On that note, we have some really great giveaways from each of them. So in the follow-up message that we'll send out, we'll send the recording from today, their LinkedIn, so you can reach out to them directly. But each of them have a giveaway, whether it's like a PDF, a one-pager, a free trial, etc. So we'll send that out usually within the next 24 to 48 hours. But again, huge thank you for everyone being here today, and engaging in the conversation. But then for our panelists, this was such a great conversation, and really learned a lot from you. I loved the diversity on the panel and the different perspectives that you all are coming from. Just real quick as we close, also wanted to let you know some other virtual events that we have coming up with Talent Collective, just in the next month or so. So some of those topics will include demystifying compensation, leading like a lioness, and then content conversion. So talking about inbound leads and the content that we're putting out there. So keep an eye on our Luma page, on our website, on our LinkedIn pages. We hope you'll join us again, and keep in touch. Feel free to connect with me too if you'd like to learn more about Talent Collective. Really, thanks for everyone for being here today, and hope everyone has a good afternoon.
Thank you, Krista.
Thanks, Krista, for having us.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.